I work in facilities management for a mid-sized municipal government. Not the kind of job people ask about at parties. When someone asks what I do, I usually say something like, I make sure the buildings don't fall apart, which is close enough. The real answer is that I oversee maintenance contracts, coordinate inspections, manage compliance documentation, and handle the administrative side of property the city owns or leases. It's not glamorous. Most days involve spreadsheets, emails about HVAC filters, and phone calls with contractors who want to renegotiate their rates. I've been doing this for 11 years. I started as an assistant in the department when I was 26, back when our filing system was still mostly physical. Bankers' boxes in a storage room on the 3rd floor of the Municipal Services Building. Now, almost everything is digital, submitted through an internal portal we migrated to in 2021. The system is called MARS, Municipal Asset Reporting System. It handles work orders, incident reports, inspection logs, maintenance requests, that sort of thing. Every city-owned property has a profile in MARS, and every report filed about that property gets linked to it. I'm telling you this because the context matters. You need to understand that I spend most of my day inside this system. I know it well. I know its quirks, its limitations, the way certain entries display incorrectly if a contractor uses the wrong browser. I know which fields auto-populate and which ones require manual input. I know what's normal, and I know what isn't. In March of this year, I was doing a routine audit. Every quarter, I pull a report from MARS that shows all incident submissions across active properties. I check for patterns, repeated complaints at the same address, maintenance issues that might indicate a larger structural problem, that kind of thing. It's tedious but necessary. Normally, I just scan the summaries and flag anything that needs follow-up. I was about halfway through the Q1 summary when I noticed an entry linked to a property ID I didn't immediately recognize. The ID was 74419. Every city property has a numeric code, and after 11 years I've memorized most of them, at least the ones that generate regular activity. 74419 wasn't familiar. I clicked into it. The property profile loaded, and the address was 610 Harwick Street. I knew 610 Harwick. It was a 3-story office building on the west side of the river, near the old industrial corridor. The city had owned it since the early 90s and leased parts of it to various small agencies, a social services satellite office on the 1st floor, a records annex for the county assessor on the 2nd, and the 3rd floor had been vacant for as long as I'd been working here. The building had persistent issues: mold, foundation settling, plumbing that required near constant attention. In 2018, an engineering assessment determined that the cost of bringing it up to code exceeded the building's value by a significant margin. The city council approved demolition, and the building came down in the summer of 2019. I remember it because I processed the paperwork myself. I signed off on the final inspection after the lot was cleared. I drove past it once, a few months later, and it was just an empty gravel pad with a chain-link fence around it. The property should not have had any activity in MARS. When a building is demolished, its profile gets flagged as inactive and should no longer accept new submissions. I assumed it was a system error. Maybe someone had accidentally linked a report to the wrong property ID. It happens occasionally. A contractor types in the wrong number, and a maintenance request for a leaking faucet shows up under a parking garage 3 miles away. I opened the incident report to see what it said. The submission was dated March 3rd. The subject line read, "Unusual odor, 3rd floor, east corridor." The body of the report was brief. It said that a persistent chemical smell had been noticed in the east corridor of the 3rd floor, possibly originating from behind a utility panel. The submitter recommended inspection and noted that the odor was strongest between 2:00 and 4:00 a.m. I read it twice. Then I checked the submitter field. In Mars, every submission is tied to a user account. City employees, contractors, and authorized vendors all have login credentials. The submitter's name was listed as D. Morrow. I didn't recognize the name. I searched our staff directory. No results. I searched the contractor database. Nothing. I checked the account details within Mars itself. The account existed. It had been created in October of 2017, but there was almost no information attached to it. No department, no phone number, no email address beyond a generic-looking city domain that didn't match our current formatting. I assumed the account was a legacy artifact. Before the 2021 migration, our old system had less rigorous verification for user accounts. It was possible that someone had created a login years ago, and it had carried over during the data transfer. The report itself was probably just a glitch, something that had been sitting in a queue and got pushed through by a system update. We'd had issues like that before, where old draft submissions got auto-posted months or years after they were created. I made a note to flag it with IT and moved on. 2 weeks later, I was going through my task queue and saw that IT had responded to my ticket. The technician, a guy named Ross who I'd worked with before, said he'd looked into the account and confirmed it was a legacy migration artifact. He'd flagged it for deactivation. As for the report itself, he said it was probably a cached submission that got pushed through during a database maintenance cycle that ran on March 1st. Nothing to worry about. He'd marked the property as locked so it couldn't accept new submissions. That should have been the end of it. On April 9th, I received an email notification from Mars. New incident report filed. Property, 74419, 610 Harwick Street. I sat there for a moment, looking at the notification on my screen. The subject line read, "Water damage observed in stairwell B, second floor." I opened it. The report was filed under the same account, D. Morrow. The body described water staining on the walls of the second-floor stairwell, with possible intrusion from an exterior source. It recommended checking the roof drainage system and noted that the staining appeared to be worsening over a period of several days. I went back to Ross's ticket. He had marked the property as locked on March 18th. The new report was filed on April 9th. I forwarded the report to Ross with a short message. "This property was supposed to be locked, same account. Can you look again?" Ross got back to me the next day. His response was shorter this time. He said the property lock was still in place, and his logs showed no new submissions to that property ID after March 18th. He said the report I was seeing might be a display error on my end and suggested I clear my cache and re-log in. I did that. The report was still there. I took a screenshot and sent it to him. He didn't respond for 3 days. When he did, he said something that bothered me. He said, "I can't see this report in the system. Can you send me the direct URL?" I copied the URL from my browser and sent it to him. He replied within the hour. "That URL doesn't resolve on my end. It's showing a 404. Are you sure you're not looking at a cached page?" I wasn't. I was looking at a live page in the current session. I could interact with it, scroll, click the submitter's profile, view the metadata. I told him as much. He suggested I come by his office so he could see my screen directly. When I went to his office the next morning, I logged into Mars on his computer, navigated to property 74419, and opened the incident log. The 2 reports were there. He was standing behind me, looking over my shoulder. I remember he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's strange." He sat down at his own workstation and logged in with his credentials. He navigated to the same property. On his screen, the incident log was empty. We tried several things. We both accessed the same URL simultaneously from our respective accounts. On my screen, the reports were visible. On his, they weren't. He checked the database directly, bypassed the front end entirely, and ran a query on the submissions table. Nothing came back for property 74419 after its demolition date. "It's only in your view," he said. He didn't say it like it was an accusation. He said it like he was confused. I asked him what could cause that. He said he honestly wasn't sure. Maybe a corrupted session token that was pulling from a different data layer. Maybe some kind of caching issue specific to my account permissions. He said he'd escalate it to the vendor who maintained Mars. I left his office feeling uneasy, but I told myself it was a technical problem. Databases are complicated. Things go wrong in ways that are hard to diagnose from the surface. I'd seen display errors before. Entries that showed up for one user but not another. Timestamps that were off by hours. This was just a weirder version of that. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened. I almost forgot about it. Then on April 28th, there was another one. Subject: ceiling tile displacement, room 312. The report described a ceiling tile in room 312, third floor, east wing, that had been pushed out of its frame from above. The submitter noted that debris was visible on the floor beneath it, and that the displaced tile appeared to have been disturbed from the space above the drop ceiling, not from below. I read it 3 times. Then I looked at the room number. 312. I knew that room. When I'd first started working here, I'd done a physical walkthrough of every city property as part of my onboarding. It took weeks. 610 Harwick was one of the earlier ones. The third floor was vacant, and I remember walking through it with my supervisor at the time, a woman named Carla Voss, who retired in 2016. The third floor was mostly empty office space. Room 312 was at the far end of the east corridor. I remember it because it was the only room up there that still had furniture in it, a metal desk and a filing cabinet, both pushed against the far wall. Carla told me it had been used as a temporary storage space for records that were being transferred off-site. She said it had been empty for years by that point, and nobody went up there anymore. The specificity of the report bothered me. It wasn't just describing a building in general terms. It was describing a specific room in a specific part of a specific floor. And the details were consistent with the building's actual layout, at least as I remembered it. I decided to look at all 3 reports together. I pulled them up on my screen and read them in sequence. March 3rd. Unusual odor, 3rd floor east corridor. April 9th. Water damage, stairwell B, 2nd floor. April 28th. Ceiling tile displacement, room 312. 3 reports filed roughly 3 to 4 weeks apart, all describing physical deterioration, all specific to real locations within the building, all submitted by D. Morrow, all visible only to me. I did something I probably shouldn't have. I replied to the most recent report. In Mars, there's a function that lets an administrator add a response note to a submitted report. It's meant for acknowledging receipt, requesting clarification, or scheduling follow-up. I typed, "This property was demolished in 2019. Please verify your location and resubmit if this report is intended for a different address." I clicked send. The response appeared below the original report, time-stamped normally. The next morning, there was a reply. Not a new report. A direct reply to my note using the internal comment function. The same account, D. Morrow. It said, "Building is still occupied. Please schedule inspection at earliest convenience. Issue is worsening." I stared at the screen for a long time. I don't know how long. The office was quiet. It was early. I'd come in before most people to check on something unrelated, and this was the first thing I'd seen when I opened Mars. Building is still occupied. I know this sounds like the part of the story where I should have reported it to someone, or escalated it further, or stepped away, and I did report it. I sent the whole thread to Ross, and I CC'd my supervisor, a man named Paul Keegan. Paul's response was practical. He said it was clearly a system issue, that Ross and the vendor would sort it out, and that I shouldn't waste more time on it. Ross's response was less certain. He said he still couldn't see any of the reports or comments from his account. He asked if I could export the page as a PDF, which I did and emailed to him. He confirmed he could see the content in the PDF. He said, "So it exists in some form, I just can't access it through the normal channels." He told me the vendor had been unresponsive and that he'd escalate again. In the meantime, I went back to do something I should have done earlier. I searched Mars for any other reports filed by D. Morrow, not just on property 74,419, but across the entire system, any property. The search returned a list. There were 43 incident reports filed by D. Morrow, spanning from November 2017 to February 2019. All of them were linked to 610 Harwick Street. All of them predated the demolition. I spent the rest of that morning reading through them. They were mundane, routine maintenance observations. A flickering light in the first floor hallway. A jammed door on the second floor. A thermostat reading incorrectly in one of the offices. The kind of reports that a building maintenance worker or custodian would file. They were written in the same plain, slightly formal style as the newer ones. Short sentences. Specific locations. Professional tone. I checked our old personnel records. We had contracts with a janitorial company called Clarkson Services from 2015 to 2019. They handled cleaning and basic maintenance for several city properties, including 610 Harwick. I pulled up the contract records. The employees assigned to Harwick were listed as a rotating crew, usually 2 or 3 people per shift. I scanned the names. None of them were Morrow. I widened my search. I checked with HR, with the old contract files, with Clarkson's point of contact, who was still listed in our vendor database. I left a voicemail. The next day, a woman called me back. She said she was the office manager at Clarkson and had been there since 2012. I asked if they'd ever had an employee named Morrow. She checked and said no. She said the name didn't ring any bells. I went back to the Mars account. The creation date was October 14, 2017. There was no creator attribution. In the old system, administrators could create accounts without a full audit trail. I checked the access logs, which were spotty for the pre-migration period but partially intact. The account had logged in regularly between late 2017 and early 2019. Then there was a gap. No activity at all from March 2019 onward. Until March of this year. I want to be clear about something. I am not a person who believes in ghosts. I'm not superstitious. I don't watch horror movies. I've never had what people call a paranormal experience. I process paperwork. I manage buildings. I believe in the physical world. Pipes break because they corrode. Ceilings leak because drainage fails. Buildings get demolished because maintaining them costs more than they're worth. These are practical, material realities. My job exists in that space. But I could not explain what I was seeing. And the thing that disturbed me more than anything else was not the content of the reports. It was the tone. They were boring. They were exactly what a real maintenance report looks like. There was no fear in them, no strangeness, no awareness that anything was wrong. They read like someone going about their job, filing paperwork, noting problems, requesting follow-up, as if the building were still there. May came. On the 14th, another report appeared. Subject: door to room 309 will not close completely. Possible frame warping due to humidity. On the 30th, exterior window cracked, 3rd floor west side. Recommend replacement before weather changes. On June 7th, noise complaint from 2nd floor tenants. Intermittent knocking sound from above. Could not identify source during inspection. That last one unsettled me for a reason I couldn't immediately articulate. It was the first report that mentioned other people, second-floor tenants, as if there were still agencies operating out of the building, as if people were still there. I should mention that by this point, I had driven past 610 Harwick Street twice. The lot was exactly as I remembered it. Empty. Gravel pad. Chain link fence. A few weeds growing through the stones. A faded construction notice still zip-tied to the fence, though the demolition had been completed almost 6 years ago. There was nothing there. The buildings on either side, a vacant warehouse and a plumbing supply company, were still standing, looking exactly as they always had. The lot where 610 had been was simply empty. I sat in my car the second time, parked across the street, engine running. It was a Thursday afternoon, overcast, cool for June. I watched the lot for maybe 15 minutes. There was nothing to watch. A pigeon landed on the fence post and flew away. A truck passed on the road behind me. The lot just sat there. I don't know what I expected. I don't know what I was looking for. I left. Back at the office, I tried something new. I responded to the June 7th report. The noise complaint one. I wrote, "Can you provide more detail on the tenants who filed the complaint? Name, agency, suite number?" The reply came the next morning. Complaint was verbal from staff in suite 204. Did not get individual name. They said the sound has been ongoing for approximately 2 weeks, mainly between 3:00 and 5:00 p.m. I checked the third floor but could not locate a source. Suite 204. That was the county assessor's records annex. Or it had been before the building was torn down. They'd moved their records to the main assessor's office in 2018, a year before demolition. I remembered processing the move-out paperwork. I replied again. "When did you conduct your inspection of the third floor?" "Yesterday, approximately 2:30 p.m. All rooms were unoccupied. No visible source of sound. Ceiling and walls appeared normal. I will check again tomorrow." I checked the timestamp on the reply. It had been posted at 7:21 a.m. on a Thursday. I replied, "What is today's date?" This time there was no response. Not that day, not the next, not for the rest of the week. I checked every morning. The comment sat there unanswered. I told myself I was being pulled into something meaningless. A database artifact, a glitch interacting with cache data in some way that created the appearance of coherent communication. That had to be it. Mars was a complex system, and the migration from the old platform had been messy. There were known issues. This was just an especially strange one. Then on June 19th, I received a new report notification. Property 74,419. Subject: unresponsive individual found in stairwell A, first floor landing. I felt something cold in my chest when I read that subject line. I opened the report. During routine walkthrough at approximately 11:15 p.m., I discovered an unresponsive male individual on the first floor landing of stairwell A. Individual was seated against the wall in a slumped position. No visible injuries. I called out and received no response. I did not make physical contact. Skin appeared gray. Eyes were open. I contacted emergency services and waited on site until they arrived. Individual was removed via stretcher. No identification was found on his person. I was not informed of his condition afterward. Requesting follow-up from management. I read it several times. Then I sat back in my chair and pressed my hands flat on the desk because I noticed they were shaking slightly. This was different. The previous reports had described building maintenance issues. Deterioration, wear, damage. This was describing a person, an event, something that required emergency services, a response, a record. If this had actually happened in the building before its demolition, there would be other records. Police report. Ambulance dispatch. Some kind of documentation. I spent the next 2 days searching. I checked city records, police logs, ambulance dispatch records from 2017 through 2019. I searched for any incident at 610 Harwick Street involving an unresponsive individual. I found nothing. I contacted the non-emergency police line and asked if they could check their archives. They said they had no record of a call to that address fitting my description. I thought about this for a long time. Either the report describes something that never happened, or it describes something that happened and was never officially recorded, or it describes something that hadn't happened yet. I don't like that I typed that last option, but it was in my head, and I'm trying to be honest about the progression of my thinking. By this point, I was not sleeping well. I'd come home from work and sit at my kitchen table and think about the reports. My wife noticed I was distracted. She asked if work was stressful, and I said yes. Just a technical issue that was dragging on. I didn't tell her the details. I didn't know how to frame it in a way that wouldn't sound insane. The problem was this. Every rational explanation I constructed had a flaw. If the reports were generated by a database glitch, why were they contextually coherent? Why did they respond to my messages? Why did they contain accurate architectural details of a building that had been demolished? If they were a prank, someone who had obtained or retained legacy credentials, why were they invisible to other users? Why didn't they show up in the database when queried directly? Why could I see them and no one else could? Ross had stopped responding to my emails about it. His last message in early June said, "I've done everything I can from my end. The vendor says there's nothing anomalous in their logs. I honestly don't have an explanation. If it's not affecting other users or other properties, it might just be an account-specific display issue that resolves itself when we do the next system update in August." Paul, my supervisor, had stopped asking about it entirely. I think he assumed it was resolved. On June 26th, I filed a formal request with the city archives for the complete records on 610 Harwick Street. Everything they had. Construction plans, lease agreements, inspection history, incident logs, personnel records, demolition documentation. The archive request took about a week to process. When the box arrived, yes, a physical box, the older records hadn't been digitized, I went through it over the course of several evenings. Most of it was what I expected. Construction permits from 1987, lease agreements with various agencies, annual inspection reports, mostly noting the same slow deterioration that eventually led to the demolition decision. Maintenance logs from the janitorial contracts, budget memos. Nothing remarkable. But in the back of the box, in a manila envelope that wasn't labeled, I found a set of internal memos from 2018. They were from the city's property management office. My office, technically, though I hadn't been involved in this particular matter. The memos were between my predecessor in the role, a man named Gerald Watts, who retired in 2020, and someone in the city engineer's office. They concerned a complaint from the county assessor's staff about conditions on the second floor. The complaint described a persistent bad smell coming from above, from the third floor. The assessor staff said it had been ongoing for several weeks and was getting worse. They wanted it investigated. Gerald's response was that maintenance had checked and found nothing unusual. The engineer's office recommended an air quality assessment, which was scheduled and then, according to the final memo in the sequence, canceled. The memo canceling it was dated 3 weeks before the city council vote to approve demolition. There was a handwritten note in the margin of that last memo in what I assumed was Gerald's handwriting. It said, "Moot point now." I sat with those memos for a while. They weren't alarming on their own. A bad smell in an old building slated for demolition wasn't unusual. Could be dead animals in the walls, mold, stagnant water, and unused pipes. The fact that the air quality assessment was canceled made practical sense. Why spend money investigating a building you're about to tear down? But D. Morrow's very first new report, the one from March 3rd that started all of this, had described an unusual odor on the third floor. East Corridor. I looked through the pre-demolition reports that Morrow had filed in Mars between 2017 and 2019. I found it December 12, 2018. Chemical odor noted in East Corridor, third floor. Unable to determine source. Odor is intermittent. Strongest in late evening. That was 3 months before the demolition, and it was essentially the same report filed again this year. I want to describe what I was feeling at this point because I think it matters. I was not afraid in the way you might expect. I was not having nightmares or jumping at shadows. I was experiencing something more like a persistent low-grade wrongness. A feeling that the world had a seam in it that I'd accidentally noticed, and now I couldn't stop seeing it. I went to work and did my job and attended meetings and reviewed contracts, and underneath all of it was this quiet sense that something in my professional reality did not hold together the way it should. I started paying closer attention to the timestamps on the reports. The new reports, the ones filed this year, were always submitted between 10:00 p.m. and 2:00 a.m. Every single one. The historical reports from 2017-2019 showed a similar pattern. Late-night submissions. This was consistent with someone working a night shift. A custodian or security guard doing rounds after hours. But here's what I couldn't reconcile. The Mars account for D. Morrow had no associated department, no supervisor, no payroll link. In our old system, accounts could be created by any administrator. But they were supposed to be tied to a real person with a real role. Whoever created this account either cut corners or deliberately left it unattached. I tried one more thing. I went to the city's HR archives and requested employment records for anyone named Morrow, first names starting with D, who had worked for the city or any city contractor between 2015 and 2020. The request took 4 days. The answer came back. No matches found. Nobody named D. Morrow had ever, according to available records, worked for the city of worked in any city building. July came. I remember the exact date of the next report because it was my birthday. July 3rd. I opened Mars that morning, and there it was. Property 74,419. Subject. Follow-up, unresponsive individual, stairwell A. I opened it. Management has not responded to my previous report regarding the unresponsive individual found on June 19th. I am requesting a formal follow-up. Emergency services removed the individual, but I have not been informed of his identity or condition. Additionally, I have noticed that the area where he was found has since developed a persistent stain on the floor that maintenance has been unable to remove. The stain is dark and appears to have seeped into the concrete beneath the tile. I have documented its location with a marker on the wall nearby. I closed my laptop. It was 7:15 in the morning. My wife was in the kitchen making coffee. I could hear her humming. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler was running. A normal Thursday morning in July. And I had just read a maintenance report about a blood stain in a building that had been reduced to rubble and gravel 6 years ago. I didn't open Mars again for 4 days. When I finally did on July 7th, there was another report. Subject. Third floor access restricted without notice. During my shift on the evening of July 5th, I found the third floor stairwell door locked from the outside. This door is normally accessible with standard building key. My key did not work. I was unable to complete my walkthrough of the third floor. I am reporting this as a security concern, as the third floor should remain accessible for maintenance and inspection purposes. Additionally, there was a sound coming from behind the door that I was unable to identify. It was not mechanical. Please advise. I read that last part several times. It was not mechanical. 3 words that carried an enormous amount of implication without committing to anything specific. I replied. I don't know why. Some part of me had accepted the conversation as real, or at least as something that demanded engagement. I wrote, "Can you describe the sound?" The reply came 12 hours later at 11:48 p.m. Rhythmic, slow, like something shifting weight, stopped when I put my ear to the door. I thought about that for a long time. Something on the other side of a locked door on the 3rd floor of a building that doesn't exist. Something that stopped when it was listened to. Something that knew it was being heard. I need to tell you about what happened on July 11th, because it's the reason I'm writing this down. I need to have a record. I need someone else to know, because I'm no longer certain about things I was previously certain about. On July 11th at approximately 9:00 a.m., I arrived at work and logged into Mars. There was no new report from D. Morrow, but there was an email in my city inbox, not from Mars, but a regular email, from an address I didn't recognize. The sender was listed as dmorrow@harwick.mun.gov. That domain, harwick.mun.gov, doesn't exist. Our city email domain is different, and I won't share it here, but it's not that. There's no Harwick subdomain. There never has been. 610 Harwick was a street address, not a departmental division. The email shouldn't have been deliverable, but it was in my inbox. The subject line was, "Inspection request, room 312. The body of the email was brief. It read, "I am writing to request that a supervisor visit room 312 on the 3rd floor at their earliest convenience. I have observed changes in the room that I believe warrant direct observation. The ceiling tile I reported previously has not been replaced, and I have since noticed additional disturbances in the space above. I have not entered the ceiling space myself, as it is outside my maintenance scope, but I believe something is present up there that should be documented by management. I understand that responses to my reports have been delayed. I would appreciate confirmation that this message has been received. D. Morrow." I forwarded the email to Ross. I forwarded it to Paul. I forwarded it to myself at my personal email address to make sure I had a copy. Then I sat at my desk and didn't move for what felt like a long time. Ross replied within the hour. He said, "That sender domain doesn't resolve. It's not routed through our mail server. I have no idea how this got delivered to your inbox. I'm pulling the email headers now." Paul replied shortly after. "Is this related to that system glitch from a few months ago? I thought that was resolved." I told Paul it was not resolved. I told him everything. The reports, the responses, the specificity, the fact that only I could see them, the email. He listened. Then he said something that bothered me. He said, "Okay, let's say hypothetically that someone is somehow submitting these reports. What do they actually want? They want an inspection. They want someone to go look at something, right?" I said yes. He said, "Well, we can't inspect a building that doesn't exist." And that was true. But the way he said it, the practical flatness of it, somehow made the whole thing worse. Because he was right. The building wasn't there. There was nothing to inspect. There was nothing to respond to. Whoever or whatever was filing these reports was asking for something that was physically impossible to provide. Ross got back to me about the email headers later that day. He said the headers were malformed in ways he'd never seen before. The originating server was listed as an IP address that didn't correspond to any known host. The timestamp in the headers predated the email's appearance in my inbox by approximately 15 months. He said, and I'm quoting his email here, "I don't have a technical explanation for this. I'm not comfortable saying this is a hack or a spoof because it doesn't behave like either. I forwarded it to the vendor's security team." That was July 11th. On July 12th, I received one final report in Mars. Property 740-419. Subject: personal note. This was different. All previous reports had been written in a professional, impersonal tone. This one was different. I don't know who is reading these. I have been filing reports for some time and have received only one response, which did not address my concerns. I am beginning to feel that something is wrong with this building that goes beyond normal maintenance issues. The third floor is not right. I can hear things up there that I cannot explain. The smell is getting worse. Last night I went up there despite the locked door. I found it unlocked again, which is itself concerning, and I walked the east corridor. Every door was closed. Room 312 was closed but not locked. I opened it. The furniture was moved. The desk was in the center of the room. When I was last in there, it was against the wall. The filing cabinet was open. The ceiling tile was displaced, as I reported previously, and I could see into the space above. It was dark up there. I looked up into the space above the ceiling. Something looked back. I left the room. I closed the door. I went back downstairs. I am filing this report because I don't know what else to do. I think there is someone in the building who is not supposed to be here, but I am no longer sure that someone is the right word. I don't know who reads these, but if someone does, I am asking for help. D. Morrow, I read it once. I have not opened Mars since. That was 6 days ago. Here is what I know. 610 Harwick Street was demolished in the summer of 2019. The lot is empty. I have seen it with my own eyes as recently as June of this year. There is nothing there. The building is gone. Here is what I cannot explain. 43 maintenance reports filed between 2017 and 2019 by a person who, according to every record available to me, never existed. 6 new reports filed this year describing ongoing conditions in a building that is no longer standing. A direct email from a domain that does not exist, delivered through infrastructure that should not allow it. Responses to my messages that are contextually appropriate, coherent, and demonstrate awareness of a physical environment that has not existed for 6 years. And the reports are visible only to me. I have considered the possibility that I am experiencing some kind of mental health episode. I have considered it seriously. But the PDF I exported is real. Ross confirmed he could see the content. The email is in my inbox and was analyzed by IT. These things exist outside of my perception. They're not hallucinations. They're in the system. I have considered the possibility that this is an elaborate prank. But I cannot identify a motive, a method, or a perpetrator. The technical barriers to faking what I've observed are, according to Ross, significant. Not impossible, but significant. I have considered the possibility that there is a simple technical explanation I'm missing. And maybe there is. Maybe someday the vendor will identify a corrupted data layer or a synchronization error that perfectly mimics coherent human communication. Maybe that's all this is. But I keep thinking about D, Morrow, whoever or whatever that is, alone in a building at night, filing reports, doing their job, walking corridors that no longer exist, noting water damage on walls made of nothing, hearing sounds from floors that are empty air and gravel, opening doors that were crushed into debris years ago, looking up into darkness, and asking for help that no one can provide. I've thought about going back to the lot, standing on the gravel where the building used to be. I've thought about what I would do there, and the answer is nothing. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to inspect. There's nowhere to go. But sometimes, late at night, and I hate admitting this, because it makes me feel like I'm losing my grip on something important, I wonder if it matters whether the building is there or not. Because the reports are there. The person is there. The observations are specific, detailed, consistent. If a person files an incident report, and the report exists, and it describes a real place in accurate detail, and it asks for help, Does it matter that the place isn't standing anymore? I don't know. I don't know what happens in a building after it's gone. I don't know what occupies the space where something used to be. I don't know if demolition means the same thing to everyone involved. I don't know if Morrow knows the building is gone. Last night, I couldn't sleep. At about 2:30 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen for water. My phone was on the counter. I picked it up out of habit and checked my email. There was a new message. The sender was Morrow at harwick.mun.gov. The subject line was, "Where did everyone go?" I didn't open it. I set the phone face down on the counter and went back to bed. I lay there in the dark for a long time, listening to my wife breathe, listening to the house settle, listening to the ordinary sounds of a world that makes sense. This morning, the email was gone from my inbox. Not deleted. Gone. No record of it in my trash, my archive, my server logs. Ross confirmed later that there was no trace of it in the mail system. I don't know if it was real. I don't know if I dreamed it. And I'm finding that the difference between those two things feels less important than it used to. I haven't opened Mars in 6 days. I'm going to have to eventually. It's my job. The system has other properties, other reports, other work that needs doing. I can't avoid it forever, but I keep thinking about what I'll find when I log in, whether there will be new reports, whether Morrow is still walking those corridors, whether the thing above the ceiling in room 312 is still there, in a room that exists only in whatever space these reports occupy. And I keep thinking about that last question. Where did everyone go? I think about it because I don't have an answer. Because from Morrow's perspective, if there is a perspective, if there is a Morrow, one day the building was full of people. Staff on the first floor, records clerks on the second. And then, at some point, everyone left. And no one told them. And no one came back. And the lights stayed on, and the doors still open, and the hallways were still there. But the people were gone. And in that empty building that doesn't exist, that building made of nothing, that building that is a gravel lot with a chain link fence, something else moved in. Something in the ceiling. Something behind the utility panels. Something on the first floor landing that looked like a person but wasn't. And Morrow is alone with it. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if there's anything to do. I don't know if this is a technical problem or something else entirely. I don't know if Morrow is a person or a program or a memory or something I don't have a word for. But they asked for help, and I have no way to give it. I'm going to log in tomorrow. I have to. Whatever is waiting in my queue, I'll deal with it. It's my job. That's what I do. I manage buildings. Even, apparently, the ones that aren't there anymore. I just hope there isn't a new report. I hope Morrow's shift is over. I hope they went home, wherever home is for someone who works in a building made of nothing. But I don't think that's what I'll find. I think there will be more reports. I think they will be specific and detailed and mundane and professional. I think they will describe a building that is slowly filling with something wrong. I think Morrow will keep filing them because that's their job, and a job is a job even when the walls aren't real anymore. And I think, eventually, one of the reports will be about me. I don't know why I think that. I don't know what it would say. But I have this feeling... persistent, like an odor you can't locate. That's somewhere in a system I'm supposed to manage. There's a report being written right now. And it's describing someone sitting at a desk staring at a screen in a building that might already be gone. I just haven't noticed yet.